That somehow Democrats are weak on crime and Democratic presidents are weak on crime and Republicans are tough on crime. The truth is, every major crime bill since 1976, every minor crime bill has had the name of the Democratic senator from the state of Delaware, Joe Biden, on that bill.
Today we're going to be examining Terry v. Ohio coupled with the for-profit prison industry. We're also going to be looking at different presidents and what their impact was in increasing the incarceration nation. Let's get directly into the impact of what the left and the right has done to our country, to our people, and what the solution is to these bigger problems.
Last night, I tell you, to watch that thing on television, as I did. Yeah. To see those monkeys from those African countries. Damn them, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes.
Now, what you're looking at here, this is the prison industry right here. This is the prison chart right here. As you can see, now this stick is going to point up to Terry versus Ohio. This is Terry versus Ohio in 1968. From where you're sitting and where you're looking at, this may seem like a very small increase in the prison population from 1968 until 1982. It's not a small increase in the prison population. It's a gigantic, the prison increase is double. It's almost double, 90%, something like that. I don't know the exact statistic, but I know the statistics on the wall are accurate. So what you're looking at here is 1968, Terry v. Ohio. Now, there's going to be some steps in between, and that's kind of what I wanted to get into of how we've created an absolute prison state.
Today, the bickering stops. The era of excuses is over. From this day forward, let us put partisanship behind us. Law enforcement, community leaders, ordinary citizens. Let us roll up our sleeves and reduce crime in our country. We have the tools now. Let us get about the business of using them.
What happens right here, Terry v. Ohio, what it does is this says that the police can walk up and grab you. Now, it's based on the idea of officer safety, but once they grab you, in 1971, right here, Richard Nixon declares war on drugs. Now, the reason he declares war on drugs is in 1998, I believe, John Ehrlichman, this guy right here, he admits in a 1998 Harper Bazaar magazine, he's number 181 on your wall graphic. He admits in a magazine that Richard Nixon declared war on drugs to make sure that hippies and black people would be locked up because he couldn't get a handle on the gigantic civil rights era that had boomed before him in the 60s, and now in the 70s we were deeply involved in a war in Vietnam. And so the reason why Richard Nixon criminalized drugs and created the war on drugs was John Ehrlichman said that the reason they did it was so that he could arrest hippies and black people. We know that. We know what was happening inside the administration of the presidency. The article can still be looked up. It's Harper Bazaar. Look it up. So if we know that, then why do we still have a war on drugs?
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive. I have asked the Congress to provide the legislative authority and the funds to fuel this kind of an offensive. This will be a worldwide offensive, it will be government-wide, and it will be nationwide in terms of a new educational program. With regard to this offensive, it is necessary first to have a new organization. Dr. Jaffe, who will be one of the briefers here today, will be the man directly responsible. He will report directly to me.
That's what I just don't seem to understand. As I've done this timeline of history, I just can't wrap around my head. So now, here's what happens, of course. Terry v. Ohio passes, and police have the right to walk up and grab you. 1971, Richard Nixon declares war on drugs. So in 1971, police are just going to say, hey, you know what, I'm suspicious that you have a weapon on you. And they're just going to grab you, and if they find any drugs on you, the war on drugs has begun. So that's the policy of all police. You see the blue line going down right here? That's the policy of all police. So now the prison industry is going to grow by 100,000 people. We were at 350,000, 340,000 people in 1968. And then right here, we're at 400,000, 500,000, 600,000, 700,000. So now if you take a look, and remember, I just put sticks on the wall. Take a look at this sharp increase right here. Do you see that sharp increase? You can see it. I'll zoom in on the camera, but you can see a very sharp increase right here. This little 2-year gap is when Ronald Reagan takes office. He doubles down on the war on drugs and creates the DARE program for kids. DARE. Ronald Reagan single-handedly created the incarceration nation in our country by enhancing the war on drugs and then creating the for-profit prison industry. And so the reason why you see this gigantic jump here, right here, you can see it, 600, 700,000. Look how quickly it goes, 400,000, 500,000, 700,000. Now this is just the beginning of the real incarceration nation, because our current president, Joe Biden, will write the legislation that will really take us on a ride in a moment.
Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, they literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but I just don't understand. We know Richard Nixon declared war on drugs to lock up black people and hippies. It's been exposed. So we know the war on drugs is a farce. Why do we continue this? Why do we continue doing this? We've now understood through empirical evidence that if people want to do drugs, they will get drugs. People in Colorado Supermax prison can get drugs. The guards bring them in. We double up our prison industry here, primarily going after marijuana. Now in the 1980s, it's well documented that the CIA creates crack and gives it to Rick Ross.
The only thing that's gone up more than spending is crime. Our city streets are jungle paths after dark. Our city streets are jungle paths after dark.
So the for-profit prison industry's kicked in, Terry v. Ohio is here, and now right through here, it's gonna come up, you see how it's escalating on an exponential level based on the for-profit prison industry writing the legislation for the different states, cities, counties, districts, boroughs. The for-profit prison industry, when they start going into legislative lobbying, they're now writing the legislation for our laws that what is arrestable, because they make money off human bodies being in the dungeon. And jail is no longer just a jail where they take your picture and you take off. Jail is now a dungeon.
But man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
So now we're going along exponentially because of the for-profit prison industry, but then what happens right here? What happens right here? Do you see it? It even increases more here. Why does it do this? It's going here, and then there's this almost like a bend right here. That's because of the Joe Biden 1994 crime bill. And what the Joe Biden 1994 crime bill does is this creates enhancements for having a gun. This creates extended prison sentences, and specifically, Joe Biden argues that people should have to do 100% of the prison time.
I like the idea they keep in jail longer. I'm the guy that wrote the bill requiring federal judges to keep people in jail 100% of the time for which they're sentenced, and in notable exceptions, only 85%. So I'm all for tougher enforcement. We have laws in the last several years where we don't allow judges discretion to sentence people. Flat time sentencing. You get caught, you go to jail. And the truth is, we don't very well know how to rehabilitate them at that point. That's the sad truth. I'm the guy that said, rehabilitation, when it occurs, we don't understand it.
And when people are rehabilitated and come out and become a better person, he doesn't understand how that happens. Here's the kind of the wicked part about tying everything together, the conceptual analysis of the culture. So in 1968, we create the Police Can Grab You. Nixon declares war on drugs so you can grab people in 1971. But then the Knapp Commission comes out in 1974. And the Knapp Commission says it's lawlessness in police. This guy Serpico, he testifies, the police are the organized crime for the drug organizations. The police work hand in hand with every single drug organization, from the very petty street criminal all the way up to the kingpins. All of these things I'm saying are documented. You would have to read the Knapp Commission. It's available on my website for free for download. So now you understand. Now, when we pop up here, look at what's going on. We got Gerald Ford in office in 1974, 1975, and then Jimmy Carter comes in 19... And this prison industry is exploding underneath both Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. It's growing fast, right? So Jimmy Carter is a left, he's on the left, right? And Gerald Ford, he's a Republican. Which group of people are looking out for you and me? Is it the Democrats under Jimmy Carter where it really starts to grow? Or is it the Republicans where they watch it grow 100,000 people in his administration alone, growing by 20%? So then you have Reagan come in, and Reagan, of course, the war on drugs and enhances civil asset forfeiture and criminal asset forfeiture. And then you slide down here, look at this, and now Reagan introduces for-profit prisons right here.
The first reform I want to talk about today concerns that exclusionary rule. As you know, the Supreme Court recently recognized that it makes no sense to apply the exclusionary rule when a police officer believes in reasonably good faith that he is acting under a valid warrant, even if the warrant is defective for some reason. My proposal would codify the existing reasonable good faith exception and expand it to warrantless searches and seizures. It'll make a difference to those of you on the front line.
And now after that, you're going to see an explosion at the same rate from here to here, all the way going here. And then, so now we get to 1994 and the Mullen Commission comes out. And the Mullen Commission says the same thing about the Wickersham Commission and the same thing that the Knapp Commission says, but it also says that police have now created a blue wall of silence, that they will not speak on other police. There's a section in the Mullen Commission, I believe it's page 136 or 138, I don't want to get into it, that talks about internal affairs in policing. And it says that they're completely inept, that internal affairs within police are completely inept. The Mullen Commission comes out in July of 1994, and then Joe Biden's crime bill comes out in October. This says that they will fund police through an organization called COPS, Community-Oriented Policing Services. It's an acronym, Community-Oriented Policing Services. But what the COPS program actually does is, using the Judge Advocate General Fund, again, through the 1994 crime bill, it mints new police in your city, town, or state anytime they're requested. The federal government will foot the bill for your new sheriffs, borough, district, city, town, state police, you name it.
We changed the law so that if you are arrested and you are a drug dealer, under our forfeiture statutes, you can, the government can, take everything you own, everything from your car to your house, your bank account, not merely what they confiscate in terms of the dollars from the transaction that you've just got caught engaging in. They can take everything.
If they only apply to the Judge Advocate General Fund that is set up through the 1994 crime bill, then they will get new police minted, and the federal government will pay for those police for the first couple years. I'm not sure, it's kind of murky, I can't get the data, how long the federal government will pay for those police. But then after that, it falls upon your city and your state. And so money that would be spent on your kids' playgrounds or on a new community center or an actual job corps center that taught fundamental trade skills, it's going to be paid to that new police officer, or there's new 24 cops, or the new 20 state troopers in your town, and it's going to have to cover their pension, insurance, health insurance, and everything else. So the funds that were allocated within your city, state, or town are then trumped by the federal government's appointment of new police in your specific area, depending on which agency they're in. There's so many different agencies. And look what happens to the prison system. Look what happens. And so police have a total black eye, and the Mullen Commission is hidden from the public. There's no real internet email system like there is today in '94. It's not the same. 1994 is not the same as today. So no one really has read the Mullen Commission. No one's really read it. And so it takes a long time to sit and read the literature. But once you read it, you understand that the '94 crime bill then funded a Chicago ad agency that created a slogan called "Back the Blue." And that was from a Chicago advertising agency. And the money came from the '94 crime bill.
Take some small credit for it, myself as well, and others, the presiding officer, that there is now a death penalty. And we passed it a couple years ago. The Biden-Hatch crime bill, as it becomes law, God willing. Biden crime bill is before us, calls for the death penalty for 51 offenses. Biden has made it a death penalty offense for everything but jaywalking. If you are a major drug dealer involved in the trafficking of drugs and murder results in your activities, you go to death.
Also part of the '94 crime bill is Operation Relentless Pursuit. Operation Relentless Pursuit is when all federal task force and agencies unify into one group. That's what they saw in Oregon over the protests from George Floyd being murdered. You have the CIA, the FBI, ATF, ICE, and any other three-digit agency that they can compile together to create what they called Operation Relentless Pursuit. And who is Operation Relentless Pursuit pursuing? It's pursuing you. And how do we know that? Because take a look at our prison industry. You can just follow the graphics. Whether you're on the left or the right, so far down the line, just to keep the score. Terry versus Ohio, which put officer safety over your civil liberties, passed under Lyndon Johnson, who had signed the '64 Civil Rights Act. He saw Terry v. Ohio pass that put officer safety over your civil liberties, and he didn't do anything about it. And he was a Democrat. Move forward, Richard Nixon declares war on drugs so he can lock up black people and hippies. He's a Republican. Declares war on drugs, and is this good for anybody in society to lock up this many people? And this is for marijuana, and there's a marijuana store on every corner as we keep going down the line. And then Gerald Ford comes into office, and during Gerald Ford's term, look how many people join the prison ranks. He's not doing anything about it. Jimmy Carter, this isn't his #1 concern. Ronald Reagan says, no, let's lock up more people. And the question I asked to the people who've subscribed to the social media pages, how many of Reagan's friends got in on that big boom with the for-profit prison industry? How many of Reagan's friends were told, hey, there's going to be a new company that's for-profit prisons?
I think you all know how strongly the American people feel about restoration of the death penalty. Currently, there are no adequate federal procedures on the death penalty, and so it cannot be used in cases where federal statutes provide for capital punishment. My proposal would establish such adequate procedures so that the death penalty provisions already on the books can be utilized in such cases as espionage, treason, and aggravated murder. Judicial activists have expanded the federal habeas corpus doctrine to such an extent that it interferes with our primary defense against crime, the state criminal justice systems. Originally meant to safeguard our liberties, the habeas corpus doctrine is now misused by federal courts to second-guess valid state criminal conviction. My proposal would reform this doctrine and prevent it from being used as another tool to let guilty criminals off the hook.
Because this is their stock portfolio right here, you're looking at it. There it is. There's the stock portfolio of the for-profit prison industry. How many of Ronald Reagan's friends got in on that? How many of Reagan's friends were invited in? How many of Reagan's friends got in on this first little boost of stock? And man, we're going to arrest a lot more people, right? We're passing legislation and laws that allow police, give them rights over us. So now we climb up here, now Joe Biden's crime bill. So now we're going into Democrats, big Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, George H. Bush. So this is George H. Bush, not George W. Bush. So number 201 on your wall graphic. George H. Bush, it's climbing under him. He doesn't even notice it. Bill Clinton's supposed to be a liberal Democrat of some kind. Look what happens under him. He passes the '94 crime bill just 2 years after being in office. That's insane. Joe Biden writes the crime bill. This guy, he writes it. Our prison industry then skyrockets like a rocket. And then in 2000, George W. Bush comes in, and it's still climbing like a wow. Barack Obama comes in, it looks like it starts to dissipate here, but you know why? Because we can't afford to lock up people anymore. We don't have enough capacity or money to lock up people without creating even more. And people are starting to revolt now when prisons are being built. They're going, no more prisons. They tried to build a bunch of kids' prisons in different cities and towns around America, and people have revolted. I just showed you that all the presidents, left or right, are garbage for locking people in dungeons, when our founding principle is liberty. We can't afford to lock up this many people for this long anymore. We don't have the money. Because this is the only reason why the prison industry tapers here. So then you go back and you say, well, what's the source? How do we fix it? What's the source? What's the real cause of the problem? The reason why it really takes off and the whole war on drugs happens is because when we take a step back, Terry v. Ohio, the jurisprudence of Terry v. Ohio is in a case called Kerr versus California. Now, Kerr versus California is based on the Kerrs being marijuana dealers. So they call that exigent circumstances. Police go there, they get the key from the landlord to enter the Kerr's residence and walk in and find marijuana. You ask yourself, how come they would be so bold?
The Treasury Department intends to pursue a relentless warfare against the despicable, dope-peddling vulture who preys on the weakness of his fellow man.
They break into the Kerr's house based on marijuana being an exigent circumstance. With the Kerr ruling, the Supreme Court rules drugs are an exigent circumstance to violate your Fourth Amendment right and come bursting into your home because it's a danger to public health. So then you start to say to yourself, what in the world? Why would that be legal? How in the world do I have any rights at all if the police can just come up, knock, knock, knock on my door, and then come running into my house? The way they can do it is Harry Anslinger with his father-in-law, Andrew Mellon, Lamont DuPont, William Randolph Hearst, John D. Rockefeller, and Andrew Carnegie. They demonize and criminalize marijuana using the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act because he is the Secretary of Treasury for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So we're all the way back in 1937. And this is going to tie directly to the Kerr case. When Andrew Mellon is Secretary of the Treasury for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he then takes his money and he invests it in a man named Lamont DuPont and William Randolph Hearst. Lamont DuPont is in the pharmaceutical industry and he's in the nylon industry. And William Randolph Hearst is in the newspaper industry. And Andrew Mellon has just bought 1 million acres of timber or land or something like that. And so these gentlemen here have an inherent desire to make sure that marijuana can't be produced in the United States.
Brought to you by DuPont, makers of better things for better living through chemistry. Nearly everything in our daily lives is improved by chemistry.
Then this goes up to 1937, keep going down. At the Single Convention on Drugs, Harry Anslinger pitches to the international community that they have to adopt our drug laws and our policing tactics or they'll be an enemy of America. So in 1961, the World Health Organization, along with the United States and every other industrialized country, declares that marijuana is public enemy #1. At that point, our prison industry is going to double very quickly. But then after 1961, because marijuana is declared by the World Health Organization the demon drug, in 1963, the police entered the Kerr's apartment just by breaking into their house. And then the Supreme Court, an unelected body, then invokes common law to allow police just to knock, knock, knock on your door and then come running in. Is that part of the social contract for you? That police can just knock, knock, knock on your door and come running in? That's what Kerr versus California says, based on marijuana being exigent circumstances. Did you know that? That's what that law is based on. And they use common law from the 1600s that goes before our Bill of Rights. We're supposed to be protected with the Supremacy Clause. Nothing goes before our Bill of Rights, nothing goes above it. Supreme, supremacy. The Kerr versus California case allows police to knock, announce, and come running in your house. That happens now 100,000 times a year in America. 100,000 times a year. Kerr versus California is then the basis for Terry versus Ohio. Terry versus Ohio puts officer safety over your civil liberties and changes the probable cause standard to reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is now a reason why you can be detained.
Get on your knees. Hey, I have the right to investigate, detain, and arrest you based solely on my suspicion.
The jurisprudence of Terry v. Ohio says that officer safety is the most paramount thing in our world. It goes over your civil liberties, over your right to life, everything. So because this is the resounding message from the Supreme Court, they'll then make laws based on officer safety being more important than your civil liberties. In Pennsylvania versus Mims, it says you have to get out of the car for officer safety.
But you're threatening to drag me out of my car and pepper spray me.
Now, I need
you want
to
elaborate?
you to your car for my safety.
How safe is it for you when you get out of the car around police? It's not very safe. They're going to detain you. meaning they're going to put you in handcuffs, which is torture. Handcuffs are torture, embarrassment, public humiliation, and physical torture.
I am not resisting. I'm making sure it is being known. I am not resisting. Okay. My hands are up. One hand on this camera. Well, come on, my seatbelt is being arrested. As long as your hands are up, that's fine. I'm not resisting. As long as your hands are up. I was unlawfully. Okay, come on. Sir, please do not touch me, sir. Keep your phone out. Sir, please do not touch me. See, that's where we're coming to a disagreement. It's not about I'm giving you to the count of 3. Don't do this. Sir, do it. I'm not touching this officer. It's on camera. My hand is by my head. I'm being threatened. Now you're under arrest. Now you're under arrest for disobeying the law. I was being officer. I'm giving you to the count.
Going 60 and a 50 and you have a taser out.
You're not cooperating.
You're not cooperating. Are you write me a speeding ticket and leave me alone?
That's not how it works, sir.
You're escalating the situation yourself.
Anyone out of a vehicle on a traffic stop by law.
Do you have suspicion to pull me out of my car?
Pennsylvania versus Mims, remember, it's about reasonable suspicion is the same as probable cause, and officer safety being more important than your civil liberties. After Pennsylvania versus Mims, you have Cortez versus the United States that uses that reasonable suspicion is enough if they just say the whole scene is suspicious to me. Illinois versus Gates allows them to just take information from one person. Any reasonable suspicion is good. Doesn't matter if it's your rival or anybody else. Tennessee versus Garner allows police to shoot you in the back of the head when you're running away if it's for officer safety. So if you're running away and you have a gun, then of course, using Graham versus Connor, they can objectively reason that you're going to shoot somebody with the gun.
Hey, drop the gun! Drop the gun! Why are you shooting me? You had a gun! Hey, get on the ground! Get on the ground!
And so Tennessee versus Garner is a nothing burger case. The Supreme Court ruled that police cannot shoot you in the back of the head when you run away unless it's for officer safety. Sitz versus Michigan State Police says that they can create DUI checkpoints based on the reasonable suspicion of Terry versus Ohio.
You had anything to drink tonight?
Am I free to go?
Have you had anything to drink tonight?
Am I free to go, sir?
Well, I'm just asking if you had anything to drink tonight.
Have you had anything to drink?
It's just a simple question, sir.
Have you had anything to drink tonight?
They said the empirical evidence shows that this program works. That's called a convergence of power. They converged your Fourth Amendment right, your power, the right of the people to be free in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. That was then given to the police because their DUI program has empirical evidence that it's effective.
Well, hey man, I'm just asking if you had anything to drink tonight.
I understand.
You know, simple yes or no and let you be on your way.
Can I ask you a question, sir?
You can ask away.
Did you swear an oath to uphold the Constitution?
Wilson versus Arkansas. Police cannot no-knock raid your home. They can't do that unless it's for officer safety. The jurisprudence moving forward of Terry v. Ohio puts officer safety above your right to life, above your right to be free in your person or your home, above your right to travel freely, above your right not to be beat up by the police, above your right to be in your car. If your passenger gets in your car, he has to get out in the name of officer safety. All of these cases were done by the Supreme Court, an unelected body. I don't want to drag on and on without offering some solutions. There are solutions to these problems. We just have to be willing to implement them.